Hi guys, welcome back. This is Project Life week 25 and today I've got something a little bit special. Mariska from Mariska Makes sent me a couple of gorgeous DLS kits from Scrap Delight, and today I am going to use the Dream kit. This is a pocket page kit called Dream, and I'm going to use that for my week 25 spread. So this kit is like super gorgeous. There's so many different beautiful things in it and an absolute stack of cards, as you can see here. So it does take me a little bit longer to go through them and just pick some out. It is a very heavily based pink and teal kit, and I wanted to try to steer away from making it too heavily pink and teal. So I am adding in some of the neutrals. There's a lovely wood grain card, and I've got another little more kind of white. It does have a teal grid in it, but just to try to tone down some of that theminess. Now I do have a photo enlargement this week, and so the kind of format of my photos is a little bit different than usual, and it did kind of throw me a tiny bit. So I've got 4 smaller square photos plus a 4x6 and my 6x8 enlargement. So my usual routine as far as cards and papers and whatnot goes is a little bit thrown out by this, but I've kind of got the basics down. There's so much in this kit. She also sent me the 6x8 paper pad, so I'm making sure to go through everything just to check that I'm not missing out on anything delightful. So I've kind of got the basics down. I have pulled out another lighter, whiter kind of grid paper for my title card. I'm not convinced that I want to use the pink. My photos are all kind of a little bit neutral and on the blue side, so yeah, there's no blue in the kit to pull from, so you can see me just messing around here. Now this bottom card down the bottom, it's a 4x6 slot, but I've got 2 3x4 cards, photos to put in there, so I am going to stack a 3x4 card on top of that 4x6 paper. Normally I would maybe use like 2 3x4s and tape them together to make the 4x6, so I'm not going to worry about cutting that 4x6 in half. I'm just going to add another 3x4 card on top of it, and that kind of gives me that sort of grid looking arrangement. Now all sorts of lovely little die cuts in here, so I am going through all of them, and when I say little, lots of them are very little, which I love for pocket pages. Oftentimes die cuts can be really large. I'm talking to you, especially crepe paper, and so aren't always like suitable for project life kind of things, but these ones are all tiny and I love them. So it does take me a little bit of a time to go through them and work out what I might want to use. I'm kind of just auditioning pieces as I go. I did remember I haven't actually cut this photo of Lil yet though, so I'm just going to do that so that it fits into the 3x4 pockets. I always cut my 3x4s just slightly narrower than 3x4. Just because the pockets sometimes can be a little bit tight. So when I cut a 4x6 photo in half like that, I always remove the little sliver out from the middle of the photo rather than working from one side to the other. Otherwise it doesn't really line up properly with the second portion of the photo down the bottom. Now in this kit, these gorgeous little rubber words, there are a million of them as you can see. There's kind of 2 different font styles in there, and I want to use 2 of them. I'm going to use sort of a recipe, I guess, for my 3x4 cards, 2 of each. So I want to use 2 of those little rubber words, and I wanted to try and keep them in the same font, so I picked out 2 appropriate sentences. This one here with photo of Mel enjoying the fire has this really pretty word. Again, perfect sizing for 3x4 cards. So important when these things are being designed, and it fits perfectly along the bottom of my photo. There's just a couple of little pieces that overhang off the edge there, and so I'm going to trim those out with scissors. I did adhere this down with some liquid adhesive because it is a very small die cut. I didn't want to risk ruining that with my clumsy tape runner, so the liquid adhesive gives me a little bit of wiggle room as well to get it kind of lined up straight along the bottom of my photo. So I don't often use liquid glue on Project Life, but it worked really well in this instance. These little square photos are about 2.5 inches square. They're 2.25 square when I crop them in Photoshop, but because I borderless print, it kind of exaggerates the size a little bit, enlarges it a little bit, so they're between 2.25 and 2.5 inches square. I didn't love the way that really light pink rubber word was sitting on top of the wood grain. The wood grain is a really light color wood as well, so I've just kind of left it for now. I'm gonna end up just sticking it straight down. I did kind of look at maybe adding some of the other patterns behind it to make it stand out a little bit, but again, I don't want to add too much to it, so I've just left it, but I will end up just sticking it straight down. Now I'm creating a little cluster of die cuts up the top here. It was a very sky heavy photo, that one, so I figured the clouds were reasonably appropriate, and I've just kind of layered them with a little flag shape in a darker pink just to create more of a cluster really. Now again, I didn't know about the rubber word, so I've just left it and I'm moving on to my last square photo. I had it with a horizontal stripe, and the backs of these cards, they're all double-sided, and the second side is sort of a variation on the same pattern, usually at like a smaller scale, so you do have that choice between the larger horizontal stripe and the smaller vertical one, and in the end I went with the smaller vertical stripe. It just kind of suits the size of the card a little bit more. Now I've added a die cut sentiment underneath that, and there was this other tiny little die cut. You can barely see it. I could barely see it. It looks like a stitching mark, like a hand-drawn sort of doodled stitching mark, but it was bordered in white, and I didn't love the way that sat with my other die cut, so I decided to just use it as inspiration instead, and I grabbed out a pen and I'm just going to draw the stitching mark on, and that way I get the effect that I was after without that kind of white border around it. So you don't always have to use die cuts as they are. I kind of like using it as a little bit of inspiration instead. Now there are some really cute tiny little alpha stickers in the kit, and I'm kind of going to use those to do my journaling. I didn't leave a spot for journaling this week. I didn't really want to write any journaling this week, so I am going to use these alphas just to kind of, it's a longer kind of title / journaling. That's what I'm calling it. We had not a great week. We've had some bad news with Lil, and after that my coffee machine broke. So it was not a good time. I don't really want to dwell on it, so I'm not going to write anything particularly earth-shattering. I'm just going to use these tiny little word stickers, letter stickers, sorry, and I am starting from the bottom and working my way up. I specifically cropped this photo so that I would have room down the bottom here in the blank space to add in this kind of journaling with air quotes around it, and so it kind of fills in that lighter space. It balances out some of the darkness from that top photo. It just kind of, it kind of fills in a gap and balances the whole thing out, and that's why I've been adding little touches of black with that stitching, because I was going to have that sort of heavily predominant black area down the bottom there on the left hand side. Now these rubber strips, I'm not really sure the best way to adhere them. I'm going to use some red line tape and hope that holds. I haven't had great success with rubber strips before, and I suspect I'm probably going to have to go back and end up stapling them or something similar to actually fully attach them, but for now I'm going with this red line tape and hoping that it works. I'm terrible at pulling the backing off these two, so I'm just using my tweezers, and like I said, I end up just sticking them straight down to the cards, despite me like auditioning all sorts of different scenarios to start off with. Here you go, I'm still trying to add something to it, especially to this card here, because I haven't actually added anything else apart from that rubber word. So what I'm going to do is grab a couple of these little leaf die cuts. They have absolutely no bearing on the photo at all, other than to add a tiny bit of color and a little bit of detail down here. It also does help to sort of highlight that word, that rubber strip word, since it kind of disappears on that wood grain background. So adding just a couple of these little leafy die cuts underneath here, and I told you it was terrible about getting those backings off this tape. It just adds a little bit of detail and draws your eye down there. So I am going to try and not center it anymore. I'm going to add it to the left. I decided to add it underneath the photo rather than on top. And then I'm going to go back in with my black pen and just add a little bit more stitching detail to a couple of these cards. So I'm just underlining that rubber word, and this one up here I'm going to end up doing my fake stitching all the way around the outside of it. I've obviously been taking far too long with this spread because my camera cut out, but I just am adding a tiny bit more stitching on top of these words as well, again just to kind of tie the whole thing together. If I'm going to do it in one place, I want to do it in more than one place just so it makes sense all together. Now this photo here, I had placed this circular die cut into the middle of it. This was a photo of winter solstice. I just want to add the circle in there as somewhere to stamp or add something again to create a little cluster. And I'm going to do that with the new Seasons stamp set from Kellie Stamps. So this was part of the June release. Perfect timing, winter works nicely, it fits perfectly in that circle. It's like it was kind of made for it. And I did have to go away and check the spelling of solstice to make sure I actually had enough of these little letters to spell it out underneath. I just did, so that worked out nicely, again, meant to be, and I'm just adding that in underneath. So it overlaps the photo and the circle and kind of ties it all together. But again, adds a little bit more black to the spread. Now the last thing I have to do is my title card, but before I move on to that, I decided since I had the stamp set out, I would see how many more little stamps I could add into here. So even though it's called Seasons, it's not all particularly like weather themed necessarily. The way you stamp things or partially stamp things, as the case may be, it makes sense with a lot of other photos as well. So perfectly by the fire worked nicely with my little photo of Meow there. And there's also this stamp that says getting cozy, which again worked really nicely. So I've pulled that off to use again on that same photo. But there's a couple of other sentiments on here that I want to just stamp on as well. I need a bigger block to do that though. I've only got my tiny little one here. I was looking for a sentiment to stamp on my sky photo here, and I noticed there was this little cloud icon at the bottom, which couldn't work more perfectly. I'm just going to add a few in here with my cloud cluster. I love that kind of graphic look. It works really nicely with those hand-stitched doodles too. Now instead of stamping this one directly onto my photo, I am just going to stamp it onto one of those journaling cards. It's got a very light grid behind it, but it's mostly white, so it works nicely. I'm just trimming that out, and I'm kind of using it like a little die cut myself. Working out where to put it, I really want to put it on top of the other sentiment that I've already stamped. I didn't necessarily want to cover up that much of the photo, but I'm going with it because it makes more sense that way. Now for my title card this week, obviously I've used up quite a lot of those tiny letters, including all of the E's. So I went a different direction. I grabbed out my favorite alpha from A Citrus Twist. This is the outline version, and I am just going to stamp the word week. I did try to get it straight. I did really badly, as you can see. And again, I'm just stamping directly on here with that Memento Tuxedo black ink. The cards are a little bit glossy, but it still stamps perfectly fine. So I lucked out on that one. I was worried I was going to have to get out the StazOn. And to add a little bit more color into this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use a craft knife and really carefully cut out inside the stamping. So you'll still be able to see the black outline, and it's just the inside that I'm going to cut out. Usually I would stamp that with the solid version of that stamp set, but on the pink obviously that's not going to work too well. So I just took my time and carefully cut out all of those letters, and I'm going to back it with another journal card, not a whole journaling card. I'm just going to use again that same white sort of grid pattern that I've been using throughout the rest of the spread. I'm just going to trim down a piece that's going to fit, and again I'm going to use my liquid adhesive because that's going to be the easiest way to get all of those tiny little pieces stuck down. I really loved the way that this turned out. It's a little bit more time consuming than just stamping alone, I guess, having to cut out those letters. But with a block stamp like this, it didn't take very much time at all. So I'll stick that down and be really careful not to shift it around too much. I do have numbers at the bottom of these alpha stickers, so I'm just going to add them in next to it. So it's a very large week with some very small week numbers. And I decided just to stamp my date stamps just directly onto the card and just carry on that line along the bottom of the title card. Now, like I said, it was a very slow week this week, so my camera cut out again. What I'm doing though is just again adding that sort of doodle stitching into the bottom of this card, tying all of those elements together, as well as tying that title card into the actual page itself. Huge thanks to Mariska for sending me this kit to work with. It was fun to use something I've never tried before. I will leave Mariska's link and the link to Scraptolite down below in the description box for you. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you want to keep watching, there are a couple more videos on screen. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye guys.